All right. So it's 2 past 10. Thanks for waiting, and also welcome and good morning to our today's webcast on the EU Data Act. And yeah, we will discuss practical use cases, the implications of the Data Act, the challenges that come along with it, and of course also the solutions with regards to technical and organizational measures. Just one introductory remark. We are recording this session as known at Zoom when raising questions or when on the chat. Everything will be anonymous, but we are going to record the session. So if you are not okay with recordings, I would ask everyone who would not like to being recorded. You should leave the meeting. But as a remark, everything is anonymous on this meeting. So yeah, what will expect you today? We will talk about the EU Data Act that is in force since 12th of September, so roughly 2 weeks ago. We'll give some background on the requirements, the implications, what are important right now. Then we have also Serhat today from Steelbridge, who will give a deep dive to a technical data compliance solution from the Steelbridge platform. And then later on, we will have time for your questions and some further steps, everything that you have in mind. And yeah, we'll discuss that. Before jumping into the material, into the topics, let us quickly introduce ourselves. Happy to have you here today. Also, Serhat, my name is Titus. I'm a senior manager at Deloitte, and I'm taking care of data compliance, privacy, and also the topic of data monetization. I've been embarking on the EU Data Act within the last 1.5 years. We have done a couple of projects with Data Act assessments, implementation preparation, and also with regards to the compliant preparation for data sharing. And I'm happy to give you some information on the implications of the regulatory requirements of the EU Data Act today. Serhat, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Titus. So my name is Serhat Akkoç. I'm the CEO of Steelbridge. Steelbridge is a Data Act SaaS platform. So I will be happy to walk you through the platform about what we have done and what we can do together. Thank you.
Thanks, Serhat. So, first and foremost, the EU Data Act, what is it all about? What is the background and what does that mean for you? You've probably heard of the EU data strategy being regulatory bedrock for the data level, not so much for the design of products, but more for the data level. It started in 2016 with the GDPR. You might have heard of it, of course, you might have worked with it. And the Data Governance Act is also part of the EU data strategy, also having implications and being intertwined to the Data Act. The Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, they aim a bit more to the huge online retailers and platforms, also with regards to social media. And then, of course, we have the EU AI Act also coming into force gradually. Now, also in August, there's since August, there's a new requirement alive with regards to general purpose AI models. And now what we are talking about today is the EU Data Act, applicable since 12th of September, in force since January 24. And it covers all regarding data sharing and also the fair availability of data on the market. So just to give you a bit of context where it comes from. So why is the EU Data Act special with regards to the EU data strategy in comparison to the other laws? The GDPR is a law that protects data on the one hand side, the personal data, and the EU Data Act is a law that also, besides the protection of all other data, wants to entice all stakeholders on the market to actively share data and also to create value from the data in a fair manner. What does that mean? That there are no obstacles to the data, obtaining with regards to size of companies, with regards to technical boundaries and also commercial boundaries. So that means The Data Act wants to give the user who's generating the data in IoT devices, in connected products, and also in related services, the power to have transparency and control over his or her data, but also give the opportunity to pass this data on to third parties as potential recipients. So who is concerned, or let's say, subject to the Data Act? So basically, yeah, all industries that have connected or smart products in their portfolio and all related services with regards to these products. So basically, IoT and connected or smart products, the users that are generating the data starts with these variables that we have on our wrists or we use every day, and ranging also to the huge connected machineries and equipment in manufacturing, and of course also in aerospace and whatever you can think of. Third parties, every third party on the market that is interested in these data, and then we will later also cover this, what this means from the requirements perspective. And the national adaptation, that is an important remark just to the current situation. In Germany, at least, we have a draft law that is being currently in the, let's say, referent mode. That means that there is a law draft that is being discussed that defines the responsibilities for the national enforcement and also has definitions for penalties and sanctions. I think in all other countries, there's still, in all other European countries, there's still some efforts to lay draft laws here. I think in Finland, Serhat, you probably say something about that later on. There's the law just about to being passed or just pushed through parliament. So you see, the national adaptation is a bit lagging behind, but that does not mean that the EU Data Act is not in force. So having said this, let us jump into the requirements of the EU Data Act. I just want to quickly give you an overview when we talk about the different roles, what is the background for this. The user on top of the triangle is always the one who is, let's say, owning the data, who generates the data by using the product, by using the service, any kind of interaction. The holder on the left-hand side of the triangle is mostly the manufacturer of the smart device of the product. That means the one that has the power to provide the data technically, to give access or to extract the data somehow. In some cases, it can also be an operator of a product if it's an end product. So here it's all about, let's say, the technical provision and the power to do so. On the right-hand side, I think that's the most interesting or exciting role here in this triangle, is a third party, is the recipient. The recipient can receive the data that the user is entitled to get. Yeah, the user can give it to the recipient directly, or the recipient can receive the data from the holder via a mechanism of certain frequency, etc. Most important thing, the data recipient cannot directly request the data from the holder. It has to happen via the user's consent, or the user gives it directly to the data recipient. So we always have to keep in mind the user is the one who decides what happens with the data. So what are the action fields, the main use cases and core impacts of the Data Act? Let's shed some light on this in our 10-tile model. It's a lot of text. I will not go into each detail of these tiles, but you see there are some tiles highlighted here, which will also be covered by Serhat later on with regards to his solution and in which area of activity Steelbridge can help. So when we as Deloitte go into client projects and advise with regards to data compliance or data laws, we always take the laws clause by clause and put it into, let's say, a digestible format, a digestible framework, that we have action fields where we can dig into and derive suitable measures. So here it's 10 tiles for the GDPR. I know that's 12 tiles, so basically 10 activity fields, which of course apply to the data holder and to the recipient. Keep in mind the user has rights, but the data holder and the recipient, they have obligations. So that's the reason why the user is not here. So the main important fields for the holder is, of course, transparency. That means the holder has to give the user the information via a product information, leaflet, or any campaigns of communication, what data is being collected in the products or the services he uses. Then the transmission, of course, that's the physical provision of the data. So any API, any ways of providing the data on request to the user. Then, of course, the interoperability. Interoperability means the data has to be provided in a certain standard format. That can be a standard Office format, maybe XML, JSON, text formats, everything that you or everyone could open on his or her computer, but also taking into account industry standards. So if you think, for example, of control operation units for manufacturing equipment using certain protocols, these also fall under industry standard definition. Then, of course, if you have a relation between holder and recipient with regards to data sharing, we need a contractual relation where also the terms and conditions are laid in with regards to how much can the holder charge the recipient for providing the data. That's one important thing. The user gets the data for free, and the recipient has to pay for the data he gets from the holder directly, because the holder, of course, has efforts for data provision and can also put a certain margin which he deems suitable to the data, which has, of course, a certain value. So, of course, there are some other mechanisms. Dispute resolution means that can be an external body that resolves conflicts when there are conflicts arising with regards to, is the data incomplete at the opinion of the recipient that has been shared, or are the terms unfair, etc. So these are just additional measures. We have GDPR dependency. That means every time a data set entails personal information, PII data, or, for example, audiovisual material, then the GDPR applies and overrules the Data Act in this case. Practically, that means that these portions or these sections of personal data would have to be taken out of the of the data set. The data recipient itself has to stick to purpose limitation. That means the data that is shared, for example, for maintenance purposes or for service enhancement, must not be used, for example, for marketing purposes, etc. So that's basically an overview on the activity fields. These are always, let's say, the same more or less with regards to, on the one hand side, more governance measures, for example, how you design your contract process, how you design your end-to-end process for data provision, but also when looking onto the products and services, because the Data Act, as we say, is a first line law, meaning not applying so much to the governance layer, but also to the business layer, because here the products and services have to be ready with regards to data sharing. So just looking at an ecosystem of data sharing, taking an example of automotive, you see how complex this whole thing can get. Because depending on the use case, everyone can take every role depending on a specific use case. So here in this case, let's take the example of an automaker. On the left-hand side, we have the automaker that need to provide the car data to the users, which is in the middle here of this small circle here. The user, of course, has the transparency to know what data he can request or what data he can get out of his or her car. Sensor data, any data. We will have a look at that later on, what data is relevant or not under EU Data Act. The user himself can disclose the data directly to a recipient of his choice, for example, an insurance company, or for example, a tech analysis company, whatever we can think of. The recipient itself could offer or the data when the contract allows it on the data market, or also receive data from the data market itself. And then also looking onto the left-hand side, the for the data holder, he also uses equipment in his manufacturing processes, in his value-adding processes. Let's think of IoT devices or connected smart factory, any chatbots, voice assistants, everything where he could also receive data from these manufacturers of the equipment. So you see, it's a complex relation. And one thing that I really like to emphasize again and again is that the user is the one giving consent to that the data can be shared with the data recipient or a third party. So it's not possible that the recipient goes to the manufacturer, here in this case the automaker to the left-hand side, takes a shortcut and says, hey, give me all the data of your customers. That is not possible, and that means there have to be certain end-to-end processes that ensure a definition where what data really apply under the EU Data Act, and also on the other side, getting consent from the user for their products that data can be shared compliantly. And also tracked constantly when the user revokes his consent that this data is not shared any longer. So just having an overview on what data is really in scope in this use case here, giving you a quick overview. No worries, you will get the slides later on. I won't read out all the details here on the right-hand side. That's just a summary on what the respective participants in this use case need to do, or what the user is at least entitled to receive. So think of the connected car. When driving, there's wear and tear, there's driving behavior, there's multimedia, everything. So there's user or driver interaction, at least, with multiple systems. So the Data Act says the data in scope basically are the raw data that are generated. Serhat later on will give a bit of a more detailed view on what data categories are meant by that, talking of raw data, pre-processed data, and derived data. Yeah. So here, thinking of telematics, driving behavior, vehicle location, the engine performance, wear and tear, also onboard cameras, sensors, and cameras, we think of the GDPR. We have this navigation data, we have timestamps, but also equipment state. Like, how is the engine at a certain point in time? Where has the car been? Where was the car in this at this time? So everything that sensors, any interaction or any, let's say, behavior with the car generates. And the user is basically entitled to get all this. The manufacturer has to take care that the user gets this data at an interoperable and readable format. And the third parties, they may receive it at the consent of the user, and they have to stick to the purpose at the end. Just to sum it up. The same example can go also for manufacturing. Imagine having heavy machinery, or let's stay, for example, with the example of a wind park operator. So on the left-hand side, we would have a manufacturer of wind turbines. The wind turbines, of course, are connected to an operation center, to maybe SCADA devices that control the whole behavior. And the operator of this wind park is the user. So the data that are generated within the turbines, that are generated by sensors, etc., have to be provided to the user in this case. For example, via direct download, or via the SCADA system, or via the control system, or the holder provides a certain, let's say, a user portal where the users can then download the data at a certain point in time, a timestamp at a defined time frame, for example. The transparency about the data that is being generated is in, for example, product info or in a separate documentation that the user is really literate, knowing, okay, I can, for example, obtain sensor data, wind speed, temperature, or any humidity information that has been recorded during the operation of my wind turbine. So yeah, the user, the operator himself can say, okay, I would like to share this data now with a third-party maintenance provider because I want to enhance my service costs. I want to enhance my aftermarket services. So either he passes the data, for example, 1 month data at once to a recipient for an analysis, or he requests the holder to set up a mechanism or a process. Okay, at a certain frequency, my third-party service provider, maintenance provider receives the data to, for example, perform predictive maintenance or whatever. So here this works quite similarly, but of course the challenge lies in the detail, which, the size of the products, the complexity of ownership, and that's what we, when we go into an engagement, always look at from an end-to-end perspective. What product is in scope, what data are in scope, what role are taking the respective players in each use case, and what are the derived measures at the end what need to be taken with regards to governance and with regards to the product remediation. And also, one important thing, there's this Data Act by Design principle, which will come in force in September 2026. That means that new products that come onto the market must already be Data Act ready. That means that the data can be basically, ideally in real time, downloaded or obtained by the users either via an API or via push opportunities. For example, in a car, that could be a direct download in the car, or that could also be a push to, for example, a user portal. The other way of obtaining data is requesting data, like you probably know it from the data subject rights process for GDPR. So that is Article 4 for the EU Data Act, where we as users can go to the manufacturers and ask, hey, please provide me all that data. And then they have to identify, to look, and provide the data at request. The other way is Data Act by Design. So here, that is something to consider when setting up new products and putting them onto the market after September 2026. So here, just the same page, the same layout for this machinery example that we just saw. So here, of course, any data that is generated during, for example, a production process, any operational patterns, machine usage patterns, equipment conditions, diagnostics data, sensors, surveillance data from cameras or IR sensors, for example. Services data, what is happening when an over-the-air update is induced, predictive maintenance usage. So similarly to the car example, but on a, of course, larger scale, larger volume, and probably with less personal data involved. So having said this, I come to my last slide, finally, just giving you an overview. I won't read this out. You will get this page also, just to give you some examples, what challenges and what potential third parties we would have. This table gives three exemplary industries. The automotive example that we just saw. We have also real estate, the smart building here, and we have the third example, the smart factory or the industry. So the second column is all about who can be the data holder in this case. It can be for the car, the manufacturer in most cases, but also operators, huge car rental companies, for example, that have the technical abilities to get the data out. But this has to be clarified, of course, via contract that is individually. So here it's just an example. So the users mainly would be the drivers. In the industry example, we identified mostly also can be the operators. In the real estate, there can be, of course, the tenants, the building operators, and the employees. So here you see we have a complex ownership situation dependent on the contractual situation and also on the different setups. So of course, just jumping to the fourth column. Now, counting is not very easy today. It's the fifth column actually. So the third parties, potential third parties, could be for the car, of course, insurance companies, aftermarket services. Thinking of these, free garages, not the original garages or the contractual garages. Tech companies for industries could be also insurance companies, competitors as well. Think of third parties that would like to get, for example, similar machine data from their competitors, research institutes, other operators, or any service providers outside the manufacturing cycle. So this is just some food for thought, some impacts that you might face on your data act journey. And having said this, I'd like to hand over to Serhat, who will now dig into the technical solution for Data Act compliance in Steelbridge.
Thank you very much, Titus. Thank you. So once again, for your reminding, my name is Sarhat Akkoç, and I'm the CEO of Steelbridge. And once again, thank you very much for joining today's session on the Mastering the EU Data Act. Well, I will introduce our technical solution for ensuring the compliance with the EU Data Act. And I will be walking you through our tool that enables the IoT and the connected services companies to achieve the compliance without making heavy investments. So, and finally, I will give you a brief demonstration about the Steelbridge Data Act platform, so you will be seeing look and feel of the solution in action. And a few words about the Steelbridge. Steelbridge is a Helsinki-based Finnish startup dedicated to helping the European data ecosystem and its stakeholders, such as end users, such as third parties, to stay compliant with the latest EU data regulations. Steelbridge has been founded by the Circus Group, which is a company with extensive experience in the software consulting and very well known for serving and partnering with the global brands already. So we do have a deep experience in the field, in the domain, and in the expertise. Steelbridge has quickly established itself in regulatory technology domain, and our company is already funded by Business Finland. It's a Finnish governmental innovation agency. And during the time, we have became partners with Deloitte and with strategic partners as well. And we are already supporting the European companies in achieving compliance with the EU Data Act. Next slide, please. Well, let's start with the basics of the regulation, and let's remember the actors enforced in the EU Data Act regulation. I can safely use the word of enforcement because, as we are all aware of it, EU Data Act has enforced in whole EU countries as of 12th of this month, September. So as my dear friend Titus mentioned in his pages, I think having a triangular relationship map really fits our purpose here for the productization strategies. So then we can easily understand how closely these actors are supposed to cooperate from now on, and how we are supposed to design a system around these actors. Just for our remembering, we have three actors already defined clearly in the EU Data Act. So the end users, they are responsible for generating the data through the usage of their smart devices, and they must have a real-time access to the data generated by selves. Most of the times, they will be recognized as a real person or maybe another B2B company. And the second actor in the regulation has defined as a third party. And third parties are the parties which end users shares the consent to data from their smart devices, and the third parties should be granted with an access to an end user's data by the data holders. So the end user's consent is really important for triggering the third party relevant transactions. And they are mostly recognized as, let's say, innovators, as the EU commissions are targeting to position them. And or maybe the aftermarket services. And the heavy lifters of this regulation is the data holders. So they must do all the operations, let's say. So data holders must grant a user access to the end user's own data, and they must provide operable and portable data to the approved third parties. Of course, these heavy weightlifters, we might be facing some risks as well. So considering the legal risks, building compliant complex data structures, and managing the consent layers, or facing to the costly internal compliant processes to be built. And so, as you know, they are recognized as the manufacturers. Next page, please. And yeah, when designing a product, we have a very simple questions to answer for. For example, the first question was, who is it for? Who is being affected? This is in fact, our ICP. And we have already made an entrance to identify relevant actors in the previous page, as you can remember. And the next question is, what is the problem? Not a problem, but a market shift, paradigm shift, if you like. So, which is initiated by the political decision makers, as we are already discussing about it. And why now? Another question that we need to think about when designing a product is, why now? Why that person, or why that actor? So this is where we are trying to understand the relations, the problem, the regulatory shifts, and market timing, tech shifts. So this is going to answering this question is going to help us to find our unique edge. And the last question is in fact the survival question. How to do it? So how can we solve the problem, and how can we continue to survive in the market? This is when we research, investigate, and build solutions. So now let's take a look at some very practical questions roaming on our domain, which are relevant to the EU Data Act, and let's set the stage for building a roadmap for our solution. So these are the kind of pre-evaluation questions that we are suggesting to our partners and peers when discussing about the EU Data Act. So let's look at in the columns. The first column that we need to think about is the scope and the data assessment. And one of the important questions here is that we need to understand, do any of our data sets require special protections, such as, do we have trade secrets to protect? Do we have personal data, IP rights to protect? So these are important questions in the first vertical. In the second vertical so we can cluster them as contractual obligations, such as, do we inform users about their rights to access, to retrieve, or to erase the data? So do we position the actors in place, and do we inform in the contractual structures or not? So this is an important question when creating a data product strategy. And another vertical that we need to evaluate is data sharing and switching, which is more about the technology part. So do we comply with the technical standards for data sharing and interoperability? So this is an important question for manufacturers to consider, and even for the data third parties as well. And for the last important question, more about the compliance and the risk management. So there is a very big important question that we also seeing from our partners is that, do we understand the penalties for being non-compliant? Because some people or some partners would also choose to stay and wait for the results or for the market. So, but yeah, this is a strategy that might be followed up, but there is a risk of it as well. So we need to understand those kind of questions correctly in order to create a productization strategy, or how to survive. These are the relevant questions for that purpose. Next page, please. So now we know who is who from the regulatory point of view, but we need to understand what and how questions as well. In order to build this technical solution service, the first step is to understand and evaluate the data itself. So what kind of data we are generating through our services, through our IoT, through our connected services. This is very important to understand, to evaluate for the manufacturers. And well, happily, not all data is relevant to the EU Data Act. For that, we need to understand the difference between the data types, which data falls into the scope and which not. Here's a descriptive page, which you will also get after the webinar into your emails. So you can go deeper in that. So here you can see which data falls into the scope and which is not. And on this page, it is going to be helpful to understand what data falls into the scope and what data not. So let's go into the details of that. Now we have the very important data, which directly falls into the scope, is the called raw data. Raw data, also called primary or the source data, includes any data directly generated by a connected product or its user without substantial processing. For example, sensor outputs. For example, temperature information, pressure information about the outside, speed, GPS information. Another example, user inputs such as touch screen actions, button presses, or machine logs or timestamps. Those are directly falling into the scope of the raw data as well as into the EU Data Act scope as well. And the second cluster is the pre-processed data, which is lightly touched data. It's also falling into the scope of the EU Data Act. So by definition, pre-processed data is a raw data made understandable or usable through basic processing, but without altering the meaning. So let's give some examples around it. So a data is still in scope when it is normalized, filtered, calibrated, or reformatted, or if it is combined with tags such as timestamps or locations, or if the data is converted to a more user-friendly units, for example, such as conversion from Fahrenheit to Celsius degrees. And the key here is that these data still reflect the real-world status, like machine condition or environment. It's not going to generate something new insights about the data. Even if formatted or slightly transformed, the original nature has to remain intact. And the last cluster is the inferred or derived data, and this goes out of the scope. Well, by definition, inferred or derived data is that these are the outputs of a significant processing line or often involving proprietary algorithms, AI or machine learning predictions, advanced sensor fusion data structures, or might include complex analytics. So in this cluster, data holders do not have to disclose insights generated by the software, or they do not have to disclose the predictive analytics just special to their own IP-generated platforms, or they do not have to disclose the new business intelligence models in this cluster. But what is most relevant still here is that the linear mathematical algorithms, such as basic math functions, if the data still contains results coming out from the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or calculating an average, so to say, the linear algorithmic processes, those still counts as a pre-processed data and still remains in the scope. This is the difference. Next page, please. So now look at the solution part, because we know what kind of data that we are supposed to put in the scope and how we are going to structure that. And from this point forward, and now we are going to focus on how can we survive this regulation. This is the time where our productization questions are being answered. So Steelbridge is an all-in-one EU data compliance platform for manufacturers. So for manufacturers, we ensure the regulatory conformity and build the trust through the secure, transparent data sharing across the connected ecosystem. And of course, our platform enables to unlock the new revenue streams from the untapped IoT data feeds, which are the monetization models. So we approach to the solution implementation in 3 phases. In some cases, some partners already resolved the first part. But anyhow, let's cover that side too. The first phase is the consultation phase. This is the time together that we spend the time together with the manufacturers, so to say, in their back office, for example. So we try to understand which interface data types are being generated and which interface feeds should be created. So this is please remember the page where I mentioned the data types. And the second phase is going to be about the integration phase. If we have the interface feeds ready, so imagine that we decided on what kind of data feeds that we are supposed to include to the platform, and up from that point forward, we are taking over these feeds be careful, we are not keeping the data. We are just getting the endpoints, data endpoints. So from this point forward, we are deploying the integration phases. And integration phase could change between 2 to 3 weeks in the subscription model of the platform, or we can deliver the complete customized platform within 4 to 8 weeks. So basically, this is a really phased deployment process for us. And the last phase is about the evaluation phase. Of course, we do not leave the partner alone after the implementation. We continue to oversee the platform and continue to support the partner for contracted years. And from the strategic framework perspective, we guide the partners through every phase, from compliance technical solution consultation to platform integration, and with the ongoing optimizations, we are ensuring that the partners remain continuously aligned with the regulatory requirements. Next page, please. So yeah, now let's take a closer look at the platform structure as we are referring to. So what we offer is an all-in-one solution that adapts to each actor on the platform, providing relevant features and accesses tailored to different user roles. Please remember the roles that we have give information about: end user, manufacturer, and the third party. So our platform is acting differently for each different user. So as I said, when I refer to different actors on the platform, I mean that every actor defining the regulation is also defined within the platform, each with own specific registration process. So we have the data holder role, which is more about access, data holder role access, end-user role access, and the third-party role access to the platform. So high-level information about the SaaS platform. Our platform is modular, compatible with any cloud platform, horizontally scalable, providing critical layers such as strong authentication of users, billing layers for data transactions, company verifications for manufacturers and the third parties. And these are just some part of the essentials that manufacturers has to deal with for EU Data Act. Most importantly, as said, once again, I would like to repeat it, we are not storing the data. We are just transacting the data by proxies that we are going to deploy on the customer's cloud services. So again, that might be easily overseen by the partners as well at any time they want. And lastly, we have an integrated data marketplace as well, which gives a further monetization opportunities to the manufacturers. Next page, please. So yeah, now I will walk you through each user role defined on the platform, and we'll give you information about the customized features for these roles. Let's start with the data holder user role. As said, Steelbridge Data Platform behaves differently for different user roles. In the data holder user interface, we provide features for device and data source registrations. This is where the manufacturers or the product managers of the manufacturers are able to submit, delete, or manage their own feeds, interface feeds. And another important feature layer is consent request handling. So this is where the manufacturers are able to review, approve, and they process the incoming data access requests from the third parties. Real-time access logs gives manufacturers to monitor who accessed what data, when, and under which legal basis, for example, consent or contract. Another important layer is the data monetization settings. So manufacturers are able to set the pricings and the conditions for data sharing with the third parties or partners. And they can manage the invoicing processes for transactions with the third parties, including the margin information as well. So on the platform, manufacturers could easily define some base prices for the small SMEs, and they can put margins for the big third-party data requesters, according to the EU Data Act, of course. And lastly, we provide interface collections. Imagine that if the manufacturer is managing a complex system, we are also defining this process under the feature layer called interface collections. So manufacturers could easily define their further business partners in their own interfaces. Next page, please. For the end user roles, of course, this is in fact the most important actor of the EU Data Act. End users could register themselves to the platform, and when they register, they will be having features for managing their own data registration processes. So they can register their own products and they can start to manage their data, and they can control what kind of data they are generating and what kind of data they are getting. So they can, another important and most important layer is the consent management. End users could approve or reject requests coming from the third parties to use their data. They can check the access history overview. They can transfer their ownership to another person. So please remember the Titus's example case in the automotive. So sometimes I can transfer my car to my brother, for example, and he can also register the same car with his own data transactions easily with the tools on the platform. And lastly, the strong authentication gives opportunity to data holders to only strongly authenticated people to access their data feeds. So this is another tool that we are also providing on the platform. Next page, please. And the last actor that is able to access to the platform is the third party. So upon registration of the third party users, so the third parties will be able to access to data request portals, so they can easily access the data feed from specific users by using the relevant interfaces. They can track the consent status. They will be registered only if they are verified through the system. So this will verified companies will help the manufacturers to understand who they are dealing with and what kind of, and by providing the correct pricing status and pricing management. As I said, based on the company's registration details, base prices or margin adjustments can be applied to the interface feeds when purchased by the third parties. And lastly, the third parties are easily manage the APIs for the data interfaces. And lastly, as I mentioned, we have an overall layer for the data marketplace. So data marketplace is the place where we are giving opportunity to manufacturers to put their data feeds, interface feeds, for further monetization purposes. In the marketplace, the manufacturers will have data accessibility layers, so they can submit their data feeds without any personal information. So it can be those type of data feeds could be clustered as public interfaces. So they can submit their public interfaces to the marketplace, and they can display their pricing and licensing conditions on the marketplace, still conduct secure API integrations, and it will, again, as said, will create another monetization channel for the manufacturers. And as a part of the feature of the marketplace, we also provide coming soon option to the data sets as well. So the users of the marketplace will get an early visibility into upcoming data interfaces and data sets planned for the onboarding. So it will create its own demand on the marketplace as well. Now, from this point forward, I would like to jump to the live demo environment. If my dear colleague give the permission to share my screen. All right.
You should be able to share.
Yes, just a moment. Let me set it up. Okay, so can you see my screen? Yeah. Well, this is the platform. This is the platform entrance. And at the moment, for the demo purposes, the first actor that I would like to present you is the data holder. And here I give a little hint about the account registration. So I registered to the platform as a data holder. It's just a small letter here, makes the difference, data holder. And when I try to sign in, I will come to an OTP layer. And with the OTP information entered from my cell phone, application. Let me just put it there. So this is the platform's look and feel for the data holders. And as said, data holders in the white label projects, we deliver our platform with customers' own branding. Within the customized data platform, data holders have extensive management and tracking abilities for the data transactions that will happen on the platform. So we also provide further engagement tools, such as further marketing tools, which will enhance the communication with the audience, within their own ecosystems. For example, end users and the third parties who will register to the white label platform will be also seeing those clickable materials as well. But the most important functionality over here for the data holders is the interface registrations. So this is where we are creating the interfaces. So with the create interface functionalities, I can either set my interface to be submitted into the user management field or the market field without any personal information. So I easily set up a display name for the interfaces of my devices. I submit 3 data endpoints. The first one is the data interface URL I'm going to define. And the second URL is going to be about the registration information, where we are matching the end users with the upcoming data information, metadata information, or the raw data information coming from the manufacturer side. And the third URL we require as an endpoint from the manufacturer is a documentation interface, which is the further documentation information relevant to the upcoming data interfaces. And when we create the interface, this is the type of the information that we are getting on the dashboard. And with correctly setting up, after correctly setting up the data endpoints, data manufacturers, data holders could easily update their interface prices. So here we can easily update the base price, and here we can easily set a margin for the big companies. So this is the main functionalities for the data interfaces. And of course, there are many other functions available for the data holders. And those will be explained if you like to be informed in a wider demo environment. So now I'm signing out from the data holder interface, and I would like to show you the end user interface. And for that purpose, I'm just going to change the name of the account to customer. And again, with the same platform acting differently for the different users. Now I'm entering my account for the customer, and I need to put my OTP code here. And with the OTP code, here I'm accessing to the platform as an end user, as a real person or another B2B. So please remember the marketing assets that I have briefly informed in the data holder interface. So whenever the data hold in the white label projects, whenever a data holder sets a marketing communication here, an end user will also see those informations available in their own interfaces. So the most important activity that an end user is supposed to do is to register their products and to register their consents. So to register the device, here we give options for selecting the manufacturers, setting the serial numbers or the ID numbers coming uniquely to the end user, and setting a display name. And with this information already entered on a demo end user interface, here I can see the further information. So when I wanted to connect my data, so this is how I access to the manufacturer's data feed. And when I go to the connection instructions, these are the exact feeds coming from the manufacturer. So I can access my momentarily data feed being provided by the data holder. So the second most important activity that an end user is supposed to do is to manage the permissions. So for that purpose, I can grant an access to somebody. In this case, we are going to provide an access to a third party, for example, this account, with a specific message. We can just give them some further information or define an access with a duration, or we can provide a continuous access to the third parties. and which this purpose, I have already granted 3 permissions to 3 different companies. For example, my specific device information is being accessed by a big company, for example, by an insurance company or from a very small company. So these 3 different accounts are already reaching to my own interface. Now I'm logging out for the sake of the presentation time. I just want to show you the third-party functionalities. Again, with the same logic, I have the OTP code for the third parties. Just a moment. Of course, it's changing momentarily. By putting the right OTP code, now the third party is accessing to interface. And here I can see my name, insurance company. Now I'm acting as an insurance company. And the most important activity that a third party is supposed to do is to access to the end user's device information. So as I requested an access from the customer, and the customer granted me an access to his infotainment systems. Here I can see the monthly price, which is set by the manufacturer. And here I can see that user's specific data feed, which has been consented, which has been granted by a consent given by the end user. And here I can download the data feed directly coming from the specific user's endpoint. So another important function that a third party is supposed to do is they manage the invoices. Of course, these will be generated every end of the month. So this was all about the platform's look and feel. And if you like to see further demonstration, please contact us, and we will be happy to set a separate session to inform you more about the platform.
Thank you very much, Serhat, for this very insightful presentation of your platform. And now I think we still have some time for your questions. And just feel free to use the Q&A section. I think we already have 1, 2 questions that we can answer. But we can also extend it a bit if you still have some time and have more questions. We can also use a bit of a good prolong the session a bit. So yeah. Feel free to ask, and also in any cases, ask us with regards to the regulatory background, any questions that you might think of. So let me look into the Q&A section, what we have there. So one question that we received was, how can we identify what is trade secrets, what is not trade secrets, and what data needs to be protected? So yeah, this is a very good question. And as I was giving you some background on the regulatory impacts and the requirements, when we as Deloitte did our Data Act readiness assessments, we also had a look on the data level, on the current data governance, which is from 2 angles, perspectives, very crucial, because on the one hand, the data needs to be properly organized, also not only within data products, but to have a solid classification. Because as Serhat showed, these different clusters of data, like the raw data, what is raw data, what is preprocessed, and what is the derived or inferred data at the end. You might already have existing classification schemes in place that might help you to additionally classify for the EU Data Act scoping or for the EU Data Act relevance of your data. So thinking of, for example, existing cyber classifications in place, confidential, non-confidential, strictly confidential, etc., or additional technical classifications in your, for example, standard systems. In some industry projects, we learned, for example, that there are machine categorization standards, that how machines communicate among each other. So this could also be a good source for classification. So in a nutshell, having a solid data governance and an idea of how to classify the data and putting it into this, let's say, 3 layer model that Serhat showed to you really helps a lot to have a standardized view on what data I define in scope as a holder or out of scope. Of course, there will be gray zones, but I think having an end-to-end process, for example, when new data sets come into a pipeline or an app is generating new kinds of data, then there needs to be a sounding process, a classification process where there are certain gates where you define into what bucket the data fall. So this is the question with regards to the classification. So are there any other questions with regards to the EU Data Act or the platform? For the moment, I can't see any other questions, just looking into the chat. Now we have a question in the Q&A section. Why would I, as end user, give access to my data to anyone? Serhat, would you take this question?
Well, happily, yeah, sure. For example, imagine that an insurance company might require your environmental conditions data coming from the smart home systems, for example, in order to give you a discounted insurance policy. In that case, you would want to give an access of your internal environmental data feed coming from your smart home systems to an insurance company. So in that case, that might be, this is going to be useful. And the same goes for the aftermarket services, such as if we take an automotive example, if we take an example from the automotive industry, imagine that you are driving a car and, your car broke up on very remote area and there is only one repair shop in that field, which is not in your registered, which is not in your formal repair partners.
To me on Saturday.
Yeah, for example. And in that case, you might want to give your car's information data feed to an unregistered, let's say, repair shop, so that repair shop could easily access your car's diagnostics in order to fix your car.
Or thinking, for example, of this industry example, if you are an operator of huge machinery and you have a third party, let's say, diagnostics company that offers to you seamless maintenance at more attractive prices, and then you decide, okay, all of this wear and tear data, all of this performance data, engine state data that I would like to give to the tech or the analysis company could be used for calculating, for example, better forecasts. When does the engine or the machine break? When are there failures? Or also sticking to the insurance example, the insurance, of course, has a very mathematical baseline model for calculating the probabilities, the impacts, etc. So if they have real data from or live data, they could easily calculate better services. I hope this answers your question. And now there are more questions coming in. The next one is, how can raw data be in scope for the EU Data Act, but the inferred data is not, considering the inferred data consists of the raw data? Serhat, would you like to take this one, or should
Yeah,
we jointly?
sure. I mean, I can give a few words about it. Well, the inferred data or the derived data is going to be a result of a more complex algorithm, such as such algorithms will be applied through proprietary algorithms or through some complex AI or machine learning productions, or there might be some complex information coming from internally calculated complex information coming from some advanced sensors. So in that case, inferred or derived data is not going to be in the scope of the Data Act. But as said, the basic mathematical algorithms or the basic mathematical calculations will be still falling into the EU Data Act scope.
All right, then there's another question. Is SIM card connected device according to Data Act? Phones are apparently not under the regulation. However, SIM cards are the foundation for whole area of OT, and it will matter if Data Act applies. Maybe we can do it jointly, Serhat. I'll take the first part, and then you could give technical details. It is correct that phones are not under the regulation because every storage device, phone counts in this case under, as a storage device, as well as, for example, a PC, a laptop, tablets, etc. Because data is, of course, there's also user interaction with that, but in this case, it does not count because it's not an IoT device as per definition of the EU Data Act. With the SIM card, I'm just assuming you might refer to IoT boxes or data collectors that use a SIM card, for example, for connecting to the host or connecting to a server, transmitting the data. In this case, I would say in this case it's just a transmitting mechanism. In this case, I would say the SIM card itself does not apply to the Data Act because it's a measure of connecting, but the data that of course is sent via the SIM card, for example, let's assume it's an IoT box attached to a production site. And this IoT box has a SIM card sending the engine conditions or the performance conditions constantly or a certain frequency to a server. So without the interaction operation data on this device, the SIM card would not transmit any data or just transmit, I don't know, data, communication data with the, I'm not a communication or a technical expert with this, but connect to the telecommunication provider, but there wouldn't be any IoT data, relevant IoT data exchanged. Of course, there could be some gray zones when you, for example, access and generate log files, etc. But in this case, I would say the likelihood of being in scope for this case is very low. Serhat, would you like
Yeah,
to add something?
I mean, a few words from my side. SIM cards are mostly considered as an infrastructure layer. They are not considered as a connected product because they are not generating or collecting product use data. It only enables the connectivity. So, from this perspective, SIM cards themselves are not regulated directly in the Data Act, but they are giving access to the devices who are able to collect user data. So from that perspective, devices and systems that rely on the SIM connectivity are regulated, not the cards themselves directly.
I hope this answers your question. Let me just look if there are more questions left. No questions so far. So I would like to say thank you a lot for attending today, for making time to listen to our presentation for the EU Data Act. And thanks a lot. And if you have any questions going forward, I would like to see follow-ups to our services and also dig deeper into the Steelbridge solution. Don't hesitate to contact Serhat or me directly.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Have a nice week ahead. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.